Hey, Pastor Willie, how's it going?
Man, all is well. Happy to be here. Excited about chatting with you.
Man, I love it. Thanks for coming on the show. So you're a pastor of a great church out in New Jersey. But before we kind of jump into that, man, give us your story. How'd you get into ministry? What's your journey been like? And you know, you can start wherever you want, but how'd you kind of get here and into this church today?
Yeah, so I started ministry when I was 16 years old, back in Texas, in the Houston area, and I sensed this call to do this work, this call to share love, this call to really invest in local church community, from just an experience of extending forgiveness to somebody who was a friend, that wasn't a friend, then became a friend again. And that was really my sort of openness to the idea of going into ministry, into preaching as some kind of earnest and real vocation. And so that happened at my childhood church, at the First Union Baptist Church, where my grandparents were deacons and trustees. Was a deacon and a trustee and an usher.
Wow.
So I grew up not only with a sort of individual conviction, but there was also a profound communal discernment there from the folk I grew up with, who were just sure that there was something about me that was a benefit to church, something about how I carried myself, how I moved. It was like, yo, that boy's going to be a preacher. So I sort of see my entry into ministry at 16 from that kind of individual experience, but also placing that alongside the kind of communal discernment and affirmation that I experienced there. And, from there, went to school in Atlanta, where I took my college experience as a way of preparing to do this. I really thought, I said I was going to be pre-med, right?
Okay.
And for a little while, I was a bio major for maybe about 3 weeks. And then I sort of just gave that up. And was like, you know what? I'm a preacher. I'm going to be a preacher. And so,
did you go pre-med and then switch to like theology or like?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was bio pre-med for about 2 weeks. Then I actually was a business major for about a
That's
month.
like the fallback. You're like, yeah, business. Let me just go do that.
Right. And then ultimately I settled on history and religion. And so that is like the history and religion part with a focus on like Christian history, a focus on American Christian history, and theology. So that sort of prepares me in my college way. Then I go to seminary, where I'm explicitly committed to thinking through theology and the like. And then after I graduate from seminary, I go back home to Houston. I work at my home church there for 2 years. Then New York, where I work as an associate pastor for 2 years. And from there, I'm connected to the Mount Zion Church in Pleasantville through my boss, my mentor, my big brother in New York City. And 5.5 years later, I'm still in Atlantic County, New Jersey.
There you go. So you've been at that church for 5.5 years, and you're the senior pastor, or what would your actual title be at your church?
Yeah, so formally the title is senior pastor. Sometimes I go by lead pastor.
Lead pastor, senior pastor. Okay.
Most of the documentation says senior, yeah.
Got it. And what's it been like for you? You're the senior pastor, you're kind of the lead, responsible person. I'm sure you got a great team and all that, but what's the last 5 years been like just from a personal being a senior pastor perspective? Yeah.
So, I mean, one, I just want to name the thickness of the context, right? Is that, so I'm called to this church when I'm 29. And at the time, the average age of the church is probably 70.
Yeah.
Right? So I come into the context as the senior pastor, 40 years, sometimes 50 years, the junior.
Yeah, right. Of everybody else in the room, right?
Right. I'm the youngest guy in the room. And I have this responsibility of journeying with people who have experiences that I know nothing about, in terms of in terms of my lived reality.
Yep.
And I come in with a different understanding of what it means to build community. One that is deeply open, one that is really invested in what happens outside of the walls versus what happens inside of the walls. And I come to a very parochial, insular community that is really excited about its food pantry, but does not have the same kind of DNA around outreach, around social justice,
right,
around what does it mean to capture the millennial generation and younger.
Wow.
So, one of my most contentious experience was actually when I stopped wearing suits and started wearing jeans and polos or cardigans on Sundays.
You did that way too early. You went right for it.
Way too early. First year in, I decided to maybe month 13 is when I attempted it, and it was still too soon.
And this is fantastic. I love that I just love the situation, because being the younger person in the group of people that have been around, probably a group of people that have been at that church for a long time. So they're both older, just physically older, but also older. They've been around that church. They've served for a long time. You probably got people that have been there for 20 years and, this is their home.
Easily. Our church is 115 years old.
Oh, okay. There you go. 20 is probably the average then.
And so, there are a couple of members here who've been here 60 years, right?
Right.
And so they've been members of this church longer than my mother has been alive.
Yeah.
And that creates particular power dynamics. And sometimes it creates barriers to real relationship building.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, it was something that I was not really prepared for navigating and marshaling.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. But when you wore jeans to that first service, or whatever you wore, you didn't wear a suit. What was the reaction? How did you feel walking in, and what were you telling yourself before you got there? And then what was the reaction?
Yeah, there's no way I anticipated the kind of mass response that I received. It was like, yo, pastor's not dressed today. Pastor's not prepared for work today. It was almost as if the quality of my output was connected to the uniform, or a uniform, a suit. And so it really wasn't until the second Sunday that I walked into the sanctuary that I kind of felt it was almost visceral. I kind of felt the rejection for what I was wearing, how I was showing up. The first time, I think it was just like, oh, pastor is trying something for the day. And by the second time, it was like, no, it looks like pastor's trying to create a habit. That is not who we are. That doesn't fit our identity. Yeah. Sunday is about showing our best. We're supposed to be able, it's the most presentable Sunday. It is how we honor God and our clothing and our bodies. Like, those are the kind of arguments, the kind of assertions that I was receiving, which were really, in a lot of ways, antagonistic to the kind of relaxed, seeker-friendly, user-friendly, millennial-friendly space that we've been attempting to create these 5 years.
Wow. And did you get any phone calls after?
Man, phone calls, emails, and our church tends to be slightly passive aggressive. Okay. And so it kind of swells and bubbles around. It swells and bubbles around me before it actually makes it to me. Yeah.
And obviously you were just trying to create this atmosphere, and you were taking a little bit of like a step of faith. Like, you were stepping out, doing something different within your congregation, which is hard. But how is, that was 4.5 years ago, give or take. So you're still around, you still got the job. So it must have, worked itself out. But what kind of change have you seen since that moment, and how have you worked it through with the congregation and led through bringing that kind of change?
Well, one of my justifications for doing it actually had nothing to do with the kind of creating the kind of seeker culture, as much as it was about, we live in one of the most economically depressed areas in the wealthy state of New Jersey. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's a sharp contrast between the living quality here and what you find across the entire state.
Okay.
And our church was known as the church. It was the silk stocking church. It was the church of the local bourgeoisie. This is where the upper middle class Black folk came to worship.
Got it.
And what's interesting is that here we are, this commuter church where 75% of our congregation drives in to this poverty pocket of Pleasantville. And there was something about the way we show up in our high style, suits, how we show up in our designer brand dresses, that is pretty alienating to the folk around our church.
You.
So
right.
It became a habit. Like, how do I actually build a community where the people we are serving actually want to worship here?
Right. They feel comfortable. They feel like accepted in that.
Being in this, right, where they don't feel as if there's a stigma connected to their undress,
right,
based on how folk are dressed. And so my initial lead was, if you can accept your pastor in jeans and a t-shirt, then that creates space for so many other people who don't have disposable income for suits, for shoes, for particular types of dresses, that they could actually come in what they wear throughout the week.
Right.
And so it was really a way of cutting through the kind of class barriers that I think separated our church from the actual city that we live in.
Wow, I love that. That's cool. Like, and has it gone well? Like, have you seen the fruits of start? And it's only 4 years. That's not a long time in the grand scheme of things. But have you seen progress down that path towards your vision?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely trending in that direction.
Yeah.
By no means have we fulfilled that grander vision of becoming a space that is really radically open and welcoming and affirming for all people. It is still a work that is in process, but we have made some significant movement in that direction. More of the quote unquote establishment, they dress down more regularly. It's still exciting to see a deaconess or a deacon or a trustee come in with jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
The most the most highly prioritized Sunday is our first Sunday, and that is really a formal experience.
Right.
And to see people coming to our most formal Sunday in relaxed garb and relaxed attire is a part of that shift. It's part of the fruit.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, man, switching topics, because we could talk all day about that. I think it's really cool what you're up to and kind of how you're trying to transform what's happening there in the church, and seeking God's kind of help reaching your community, right? And really reaching the people around you. In the midst of all that, COVID hits, 18 months or so ago. And what's it been like the last 18, 24 months? What's it been like for you as a leader, and the shift in doing church online? What's that whole journey been like?
I mean, it's been a grueling experience. But the most torturous part is preaching in studio, right?
Yeah.
So just you and a camera skeleton crew of folk who help fulfill the service.
Right.
I mean, one of the greatest anxieties that I've had as a leader is around sermon connectivity. How do I, in our tradition, which is profoundly call and response, right? You can in many ways measure the effectiveness or the penetrativeness of a message based on in-person response. Right.
Like, you hear the crowd, you hear the congregation,
without the crowd.
Yeah. The energy you feel from the audience, from the church, is real. And now you have crickets, like literally silence going on.
You have an unblinking camera in front of you, and it has been, and so it's required a different level of faith. Right? It's required me to actually trust the words that fall out of my mouth without any signification, any signs that they're working. Right. Until you go back to the chat later on. But it's really led me to trust my words and trust my process of preparation and proclamation in the actual moment. And so, preaching itself has become an act of faith in ways that I think I only thought about it as a resource for building faith. Now it has itself become an act of faith because I have no choice but to trust that these words are still doing the work of life, even when I can't see what's on the other end of those words. So that has been a change. Programming has also been challenging. Migrating so much of your educational experiences, so much of your recreational engagement to online platforms has seen some unexpected successes, but also has seen some unexplainable sort of flops as well. So, there have been some things we tried around conversations around hot topics that have been wildly successful, and things that people are normally plugged into, like Sunday school, which is a relic from who we were, has not been as exciting. So seeing this influx of new online programming, how people are drawn to those in ways that they haven't been drawn to us just refitting what we used to do in person has been telling about what kind of appetite is really next for how we think about our educational structure as well, in particular as a church.
Yeah. Let's jump back to preaching real quick. So you're preaching to a camera. What have you learned about doing that well? You've been at it for well over a year now, at least once a week. I'm sure you do other stuff as well. So you've had a lot of practice. You've probably gotten way better from if you watched your first sermon online, 18 months ago till today. I'm sure you've learned and gotten better. So give the folks some tips that are listening. Like, what can make you better on camera? What has made you better preaching to the camera?
So I think one of the things that I've learned to do is to scale sermons back a bit. And so being intentional about holding an economy of time has been really important. So not preaching too long has been really important for I think effectiveness. I also think by graphic illustrations as much as you can. Yeah. So the insertion and the use of videographic or pictorial material that helps to bring out, potentially helps to bring out or augment whatever you're teaching, whatever you're explaining. So graphic illustration has been really important for at least my own peace of mind in terms of connectivity. Something really simple is really prompting folk to engage in the chat as a way of active listening. And so finding key phrases or ideas to have people retype has also been a device that I've used to measure levels of engagement. And then there are just the kind of bodily placement sort of issues. So being stationary behind a pulpit is not as enticing or as alluring or attractive as a more migrational form of engaging the congregation. So walking around a bit more. So those are some of the ways that I've thought to enhance my own proclamation, my own process.
Yeah. I love that. And how have your services evolved over time in terms of the production of a service? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so there's much more videographic material that we use. So we've been toying with our own documentary production. So we try as often as possible to incorporate homemade videos or in-house videos, in-house production into our actual stream. That has actually allowed more of our members to see our other members, right? So getting the voice and the image of people that we're used to seeing every single week, respond to a topic, engage each other across a platform. So using videography as a way of bringing laypersons into the worship experience, so that we're able to see ourselves and see each other, and not just be the pastor and the music leaders, has been I think a really healthy improvement to how we think about virtual worship.
Yeah, like trying to get more of the congregation like on camera with you, so it's not just you, but you're bringing people in different ways. I mean, I've heard churches even just grabbing an iPhone and record us a video, and just, even as simple as that. It's not high production, but it's like at least you're seeing some of the church on a Sunday, and you're trying to rotate that through.
And that's been really helpful for us, because we've used that even with the cell phones, that people were able to excuse me,
bless you.
People were able to record based on a particular prompt, something as simple as, what do you miss most about being in worship? What's your favorite Mount Zion memory? And having our production team piece those things together and animate around them. People have just really, really benefited from seeing themselves on camera and seeing, people that they haven't been in shared space with. For 18 months, for 17 months, to be able to see them and to have them a part of that worship offering has really, really, I think, increased momentum around staying connected to our virtual experience.
Yeah, I love that. Is there something that you've done over the course of time, like something you've done that just completely failed, as well as maybe something you've done that like surprisingly worked? Like you're like, wow, that was awesome. Like we got to keep doing that.
Yeah. So one of the things that failed, it failed to me, was that we were attempting to create, church is deeply collegial. It's familial. It is about fellowship, right? I mean, that's at the heart of what so much of New Testament literature gives us, right? It is this deep emphasis on the assembly. And so we attempted a few times to do game nights, virtual game nights.
Okay.
And man, they never really rose above about 20, 25 people participating in those experiences.
And your church is what, 400 or 500 or so? I forget.
Yeah, we worship about 400.
Okay. So when you
expect to see over the course of a month, about 400 unique worshipers.
Okay. So when you see 20, you're like, well, we're missing a few.
Right. And it's and maybe it was we picked the wrong day. Maybe it was we didn't explain adequately what a virtual game night looked like. So there are a host of reasons, but it flopped, in my opinion. Right. And so we kind of departed from those experiences. Another one was actually, we attempted to do a drive-in movie on our campus, where stays in their cars, how you maintain the distance. We have certain persons who were vaccinated, who were able to sell, who were able to maintain the mobile concession experience, so people could have refreshments. That too, very low turnout.
Didn't work, huh?
What we've seen is like the recreational things that I've attempted to make a part of the life of where we are and where we go have not been as successful as the sort of content-driven experience, the kind of content-driven educational experiences that we're after. One of the most successful things that we've done in the pandemic was we actually had a live conversation around sex and sexuality. It was a Bible study series called Practicing Safe Text. Right. It was Facebook Live Bible study. Another colleague and I sort of facilitated it, and I expected that to go very poorly, primarily because the way we were approaching the content was not as orthodox as our church has historically been. And so leaning into a more progressive reading of scripture, liberal reading of scripture, leaning into a more justice-centered reading of scripture, I expected it to have much more, I expected there to be much more resistance to it, but also a different level of retaliation that I thought may come from it as well. But no, it has been one of our most it's been one of our most successful programs of the 16 months.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I talked, really fascinating connection. A good buddy of mine pastors a church in Jersey. And I had him on the podcast. I mean, this might be a year ago at this point. It was a while back. And Pastor Johnny, and he leads a church, I don't, probably similar size, 400, 600, somewhere members. And he did a morning, a Zoom on Zoom, right? So like video, Zoom, morning devotional every morning. And he kicked it up. I forget exactly, but, around, a bunch of the like social unrest and just crazy stuff happening, he kicked up this devotional series for his church, and it was a morning thing, right? And people were staying on for hours.
Wow.
In the morning on Zoom, fully engaged as they, it was kind of like teaching as well as people sharing and connecting and sharing their stories and using the scriptures and just this whole thing, praying like, man, I should introduce you to Johnny because he's a great guy. And he did that, and he was just blown away by how God used this morning devotional series where you're like, everyone showing up, like hundreds and hundreds of people coming on their morning devotionals on Zoom, participating. But I think it was, obviously very relevant. The topic was, needed to be discussed, and it was a big thing, especially in their community. And so it was cool. So I'm just connecting the dots a little bit to what you did in terms of you were talking about something kind of culturally relevant. It sounds like it went well. And another church from Jersey, Pastor Johnny, when they were doing it a year ago, it went really, really well. So
wow, I love it.
Yeah, I'll make an intro. Y'all should know each other.
I love that, man.
Yeah. Well, all right, we've been on for a while, so I'm going to be respectful of your time. This has been awesome, by the way. Thank you for just, sharing your experience. But let's do a couple quick questions here to close it out.
Okay.
First one, who's somebody that you've been inspired by, like a mentor or a person in life? Could be anybody, but give us someone you've really been inspired by over the years.
Yeah, so I think some of my greatest inspiration comes from a man by the name of Jeremiah A. Wright. Dr. Wright has been a mentor for years and really helps me to really give voice to the justice dimensions of how I understand ministry. So in addition to, genes getting me in trouble as a pastor, I often get in trouble as a pastor for being too engaged in issues of social justice and racial justice.
Yeah.
And, I see those as natural outgrowths of what it means to follow Jesus.
Right.
I think there should be greater synergy between the Black Lives Matter movement and American churches.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, the way Dr. J did ministry for so long, and even in his retirement, that has had a deep impact on the kind of communities that I think our nation needs to really live up to who it says it is.
Right. Yeah, I love that. What about, give us a book that you've read, and it could be recently, could have been just a longtime favorite, but a book that's really, made a mark in your life.
Favorite book of all time is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin.
Okay.
James Baldwin makes me want to be a better writer, but the way he's really able to prophesy to a nation that really refuses to know itself and to be itself, I think has always stuck with me. And so The Fire Next Time is my favorite book. We do Bible studies on it, although it is not overtly a religious text. I just think it's such an important way of looking at what does it mean to live here? What does it mean to here when I mean America? Right. What does it mean to be global citizens? What does it mean to really embrace universal siblinghood? I think it's a text that does that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Amen. Love that. All right. A podcast that you're listening to right now.
Man, that's a much harder harder question for me. I guess my best friend has a podcast, and it's Black, Gifted, and Faithful. And his name's JC Howard. That's really the only podcast I listen to.
Hey, shout out. Love it. Love it. Well, Pastor Willie, where can folks go to check out, kind of learn more about you and your church? To go to the church website or check you out on social media?
Yeah, you can go to our church website, mountzionclc.org. You can find us on social media, Mount Zion of Pleasantville. I think that's our name across most. You can find me on all platforms, Willie Francois III. Not all platforms. That's actually not true. I haven't done TikTok yet.
Yeah, just give us one. Just give them one so they can. Which one do you want them to go to? I'm not
enough to TikTok yet, but definitely IG on IG, Willie Francois III.
Love it, love it, Pastor Willie, man. This has been a blast. Thank you for spending some time with us, and thanks for everyone listening in. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks for having me, man.